So this is a 40-acre pad spacing. That's not happening in Pennsylvania or New York. Okay? This is the Barnett development. That's 40 to 80-acre pad spacing. Not quite as dense as Wyoming, and certainly denser than you're going to see in Pennsylvania because the geology is different. So you're not going to see that here either. So here's what you're going to see, because this is what we're seeing in the applications for permits for drilling in New York. I reviewed 54 of them last week. And every one of them has a map. These happen to be from Chesapeake. This is public information. Anybody can go to your local DEP office, as I went to my local DEC office, and look up this information. So here's a map for one of the developments. Here's a map for another development. Notice anything in common between those two maps? This is the spacing unit. This is the agreed upon area between the gas company who wants to lease this land and DEP or DEC and says, okay, that's the land that you're going to drill on. What do you notice? Is it a square? No, it's an elongated rectangle. Is it north-south or east-west? In both cases, they're oriented amazingly similarly. Because it turns out that geology says that if you put a pad right here, and you drill a well 1 mile horizontally that way, and another well 1 mile horizontally that way, and you then hydraulically fracture that well, you are optimizing the productivity of those wells. That's geology speaking. But the geology won't do anything that the leases won't let it do. If the landholders say, we won't let you form that spacing unit, who wins? Leaseholders. So there has to be an agreement. The geology has to agree with a leasing arrangement, otherwise the companies can't get the optimal spacing unit. Okay? And if they can't get the spacing unit, they can't get close to extracting not 10%, but 90% of the gas that's in the Marcellus. That's what those numbers we're talking about, 70 to 90%. Okay? So what you're seeing developing here, I just toured the area around Dimick, you see a pad and there'll be 2 wells on it right now. One going one direction, one going the other direction. Are they coming back? Yeah. Those of you who signed leases know that how many pads did they say, how many wells did they say they're going to drill when you leave on your property? Are they allowed, do they have to tell you that in Pennsylvania? So this is where I'm ignorant about Pennsylvania versus New York. Well, this is what you're likely to see. Okay? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 wells. In roughly an area of 1 square mile. This is going to be roughly 2 miles long by roughly half a mile wide. That would optimize production. That takes the industry close to the numbers I just showed you. Am I making sense here? Are you getting the picture? Okay, so let me make it real, but I'm going to use my home county, Tompkins County. And we're going to look at one town. We call them towns in New York. So here's the town of Caroline, which is 80% leased. Okay. There is a map, topo map of the town, and the way the gas companies would like to see the leasing arrangements work out just perfectly with the geology is that. It's called the yellow brick road, except it's not yellow. All right, each one of these is a spacing unit that's roughly 2 miles long by roughly half a mile wide, and that would extract about 70% of the gas in the Marcellus under that area. That would be the ideal. That would get the industry close to the numbers they're talking about. And then they would do that, and then they would do that. Over what period of time? Let's talk about capital in Wall Street. How many pads are currently being developed within 5 miles of where we are? Anybody know? 5, 10? There's a finite number of pads. The number you cited was there 1,200 permits requested this year?
No, that was an estimate of how many.
Okay. So the industry numbers I read, right now, there are 3 wells being completed every day in Pennsylvania going into production. That's 1,000 wells a year. The numbers I'm reading from the gas pipeline industry, because gas pipeline industry has to be planning way ahead for a 50-year build-out, not 5, not 15, a 50-year build-out of Marcellus. They're expecting that Pennsylvania will peak out 5,000 wells per year. So that tells you pretty quickly that we're going to be producing lots of waste fluids. And I'll get to the environmental part of that in a minute, but in case you think I'm blowing smoke, this is a map of the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. 18,000 acres. How many people have flown into the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport? I've been there. That's the map of the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. It's completely leased by Chesapeake. See all those things? They look familiar? That's what's happened at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. It's completely leased out, and it's going to be drained of gas out of the Barnett Shale. Probably 70 or 80% of the gas in the Barnett underneath that airport will be extracted eventually over a period of 10, 15 years. Okay, so obviously the solution, the engineering solution to the environmental impact of that many wells, hundreds of billions of gallons of fresh water, hundreds of billions of gallons of waste fluids, is to make sure that you minimize the total amount of fresh water going in and the total amount of waste fluids coming out. And that implies what I refer to as the third phase of the PR campaign of the gas companies to get you to believe everything they say. The first phase, I don't mind saying this, the first phase is they ride in their white hats and say, you all behave like Oklahomans and everything will be fine. Second phase was, oops, a lot of flowback wastes. We'll put them in injection wells. Well, guess what? Injection wells don't work too well in Pennsylvania and New York like they do out in Oklahoma and Wyoming because the geology is different. Phase 3 is green. We're going to recycle the fluids. And that's good because they're learning how to do it. The problem is that they're learning how to do it. The universities are getting tens of millions of dollars from your Department of Energy, your tax dollars, to develop new technology efforts for both shale gas and coal bed methane development, recycling. These are all recycling projects that are underway in the last year. 3 of them in Pennsylvania. So there will be American technology coming to the rescue. The point I'm making here is you're the experiment. You're the canary in the coal mine. Hurry up and figure it out. Another type of recycling that you've already heard about, dilution. So here's how it's supposed to work. Stay with me here for a minute. I'm going to use, again, industry averages. A 12-well pad, which is what things are starting to move towards. Chesapeake says they're averaging 5.5 million gallons of water for each hydrofrac, for each well, multiple hydrofracks in the well. I'm going to assume 27% of short-term flowback fluids and 66% effectiveness in the recycling. Nobody can get near that yet, but I'm assuming that they can eventually. Here's what a 12-well build-out would look like. 5.5 million gallons of fresh water goes down the first well, 1.5 million gallons comes back in the first 30 days, 1 million of that gets recycled into fresh water, that 1 million gallons goes into the next well, so now the next well only needs 4.5 million gallons of fresh water from someplace else. That's a savings. And if you work this all out, you can actually write an equation for it, but I won't bother with that tonight. Here's the with and without. The total fresh water that needs to go to that 12-well pad without recycling would have been 55 million gallons. I'm sorry, 66 million gallons. With recycling, significantly less. That's good. But we can't get that efficiency yet. Total flowback, and this is where the impact on the environment downstream is, the bad stuff that we still haven't figured out how to get rid of safely. Without recycling, 18 million gallons of bad stuff coming off that pad. With recycling, ideal recycling, 7 million gallons. That's really good. But we're not there yet. We need to keep working towards that. So, let me summarize. If you want to know the environmental impact of what's happening in Marcellus, you've got to count the number of wells. What determines the number of wells? Geology and capital and markets. Okay. How do you get the optimal number of wells? Geology and leasing arrangements. Over what period of time? Capital and markets. So what do I need to know about the total number of wells? You need to know how much fresh water is going in because you want to make sure you maintain stream flows. And you want to know how much bad stuff is coming because it's got to go someplace. Have we figured out how to optimize both of those yet? No. We're 2 years in Pennsylvania into a 50-year development. What do we know? So, thank you for your time. Think, act. I'm always ready for constructive feedback. Email me. Thank you.